Hello everybody, welcome to our talk. It's about atomic design. It's already been mentioned in the beginning of the conference today. It's about living style guides and yes, about the Holy Grail. So let's get started. Last year on that stage, Philip made a claim. He wanted to make all those developers happy with Magnolia. So on the right side you have the Java nerds and they are the traditional target audience of Magnolia. But we also have the front-end hipsters, and in a very charming attempt to find a name for all the business people and non-technical people, he also invented the persona Johnny Clueless. So all of those guys should be able to work with Magnolia. And, well, here we are, we have heard the call. So, as a representative of the front-end guys, we have Marcel over here. He's the front-end hipster today, and he's also a UX architect. He has a technical background, so he knows a bit about technology, but not too much. Sorry, don't want to embarrass you.
It's fine.
And I'm clueless. So I'm also a UX guy, but I'm coming from usability. I'm doing some web development, but not too much. So I'm more on the UX and on the business side. And I guess we also have some Java nerds here. I guess I'll find some in the audience. So let's make a quick poll. Java nerds. Who is a Java nerd in here? Okay, the light is very bright. I don't see everybody, but okay. Who belongs to the front-end hipster category? Okay, not that many. And who's clueless as I am? Okay, so it's a nice mix. And this presentation is for all of you, so don't walk out. All right, so what's on the menu today? We have first an introduction about atomic design. That's a workflow that you can follow to create a componentized style guide. And if you use the tool Pattern Lab, you really have code in the end, front-end code. And the second part will be about bridging this style guide into Magnolia so that this style guide becomes a living style guide. And we developed an extension or tool of Pattern Lab that we call Hibiscus to do that. And there will be a demo. Okay, so for all of those not knowing what a front-end style guide is, just a quick repetition. So it's a modular collection of all your elements in your user interface, and it's not that big Word document anymore. It's now something including code snippets. So that's what the style guide is today. And now let's talk about atomic design. Sounds scary, right? But it isn't. So this guy, Brad Frost, he invented that system, and it goes like this. So like in chemistry, all the matter in the universe is small parts, and then you combine it together, it gets a molecule, and you further combine it together, it gets an organism like a human being, and you put it on templates, and you put it on pages. So the idea is to componentize, basically. So I'll give you an example. So we have a page. I mean, that's this Photoshop comp that you get from your designer, right? So you have a page, and there are elements on that page. And if you closely look at them, you see there are things that look the same. So, I mean, it's a different text, but actually it's the same component, right? So we call it organism. And we also have that one here. So, I mean, the color is different and the order is reversed, but it's also an organism, and it's pretty similar. And we can go further down. So, for example, if you take this organism, we can see there are two molecules in it, and they can switch positions, then you get the other one. So we have a teaser molecule and we have a choices molecule. And you break it further down. We got atoms, like the titles, the text, the paragraphs, the buttons, and all those basic elements that this user interface consists of. So that's basically atomic design. That's a wrap-up. So you see on the left side we have the atoms, we have all the small elements, and they come together, and we have a template, and then in that design system there is a switch. So Brad suggests to add realistic content and images at the end, so that you have a real feel about your text, about your image, and about the text length and internationalization, for example, and stuff like that. So that's atomic design. And now, is it bottom-up or is it top-down? I mean, I explained it from top-down, but actually, designers, they should do the design process bottom-up. So because if you do it top-down, you end up with 100 different buttons, and that's not what you want. So you want a consistent system, so you start on the atoms first, all your small elements, you combine them together until you have this big page. But for the developers, it's the other way around. They get this page and they have to slice it into pieces again, componentize it, and do the top-down process. So, and by the way, this system is very flexible. So, I mean, you're a Magnolia audience, so maybe you want to replace component, organism with component, and maybe there are nested components, so let's replace molecule with subcomponents. And for example, if you don't like the pages, just skip them. I mean, do whatever you want. And actually, I'm used to say component right now, so I'm talking about organism, I'm talking about components, and they are the same. So I give you a recipe how you can work with those organisms and with those other elements in atomic design. We did that in several projects in the last few months, and it worked quite well, so I want to share that. So first you need some ideas. I mean, you need to do some sketches, you need to do some wireframes, prototypes, whatever. You need to have an idea about your styling. So there is a sprint 0 or something to create the UX concept, at least the basic one. Then you can start doing the atomic design process. So first, we take out all the organisms. So we have a big list of all the organisms that we have in our project, and we work with that list. We start to draw each of those organisms as a wireframe so that at least we have a basic idea how this thing looks like. We add written requirements. For example, what happens if a mouse is hovering. So something that you don't see in the wireframe, we add it as a written requirement to the organism. Of course, we need some visual design, and also we need some responsive behavior in the web projects we're working on. When we have done all that, we can create a ticket for each organism for the developers. And they do whatever they do, some happy hacking, and they build that HTML and the CSS for that organism. And don't forget to test. At this stage, you have the HTML, you have the CSS, you can start to test each organism on all those devices that we have and find whether they're working. Okay, so that was the recipe for the organism, but what about the rest? Atomic design is more. So we focus on the organism. They are kind of a pivot point in our project, but we also do the other things. So for the templates, it's maybe different if you're doing an application. There you do examples of all those templates, all those pages that you have. If you have a CMS like Magnolia, where the editors can just drop in a component and rearrange them however they want, you maybe don't need that many templates. For the pages, they are really great because they can be used to get agreement from the stakeholders. You can have the text length tested, you can do usability testing with them, all that kind of stuff, because they look like real pages. And for the atoms and for the molecules, as I said before, the designer needs to have that in mind when they are starting to build that thing. But in our experience, it doesn't need that much specification. So it's enough to specify the organisms, and the developers are clever guys. They see when a list gets repeated, for example. So they will immediately see that. And in the end, yes, it's a successful way of doing projects. And there's a tool that I also would like to show you. It's called Pattern Lab, and it's developed by the same guy, by Brad Frost. Let's see whether our internet connection works. So that's the demo of the tool. I try to zoom in a bit so that you are able to see. So this tool handles or manages all those patterns that we build. So for example, you have an organism folder and you have some subfolders. For example, you have all the global organisms in here. For example, the page header, it's here. And you have this nice disco mode where you can see the other sizes immediately, all the breakpoints, what's happening. And you can inspect it, so you can have a look at the code. You see the HTML code of that element, and you see where it's used. By the way, it's using Mustache templating language, so you can also have a look at the Mustache code. And for example, this header element is used on the homepage template. I can click here, load the homepage template, and I see the header here and the rest of the homepage below. That's Pattern Lab. All right. But there's a problem. You have seen that HTML tab in Pattern Lab, and now you, as a Magnolia developer, you go there You do copy and paste, you take over the HTML code into your editor, and you start hacking it. You're doing the free marker templates and all that kind of stuff. And 1 month later, the front-end dev found a bug. He fixes it on the style guide. You never get noticed about that. And the things get out of sync. And Marcel, my co-presenter, will now give you a solution for that problem.
Thank you, Adrian. So you've heard of this Brad guy quite a bit, and he seems like a clever guy. So let's maybe see what he has to say on that topic. So he actually also says creating a style guide that is perfectly in sync with the production environment is the Holy Grail. This is also where we get to the title of our talk. So this seems to be not that easy. Actually, there is some guys, we seek the Holy Grail, right? There is some other people that tried to do this, and they also succeeded. So, for example, the Lonely Planet team, they created a really great style guide that has kind of one source, and it's used everywhere, and they just change the style guide, and all the applications basically change with it. The same applies for the Salesforce team with their Lightning design system. And these systems, they are called living style guides. So it's not just a style guide anymore, it's a living style guide as it automatically stays in sync. Now, you can imagine that what we try to do is to create a living style guide for Magnolia, and we call this Hibiscus. Now, what is this Hibiscus? It's based on Pattern Lab, the tool that Adrian just showed. What we did was extend it so that the output of this Pattern Lab is not just this HTML style guide, but that we can also generate free marker templates out of it. Obviously, because this is all Node and front-end based setup, you can use a lot of different other tools like Gulp Icon or whatever, that all the stuff that you need, or SAS transpiler or whatever. And we also added this module called Magnolia Light that Toffer mentioned in the keynote this morning to handle also the YAML support in a nicer way. So that's what's in it. And again, the goal of this was to have this one source, to have this style guide that always stays in sync. To have a front-end friendly setup so that our front-end guys, they don't need to deal with any Java. They don't even need to install Magnolia. They can do all their stuff just in the environment they know. Nevertheless, we still want to make sure that we can use all our build tools like Maven, like Jenkins, whatever. So it had to fit in the normal Magnolia Maven setup. And we also wanted to leverage the whole idea of this atomic design with this component-based stuff that is kind of put together to also avoid repeating stuff. So that's kind of the goals. And to quickly show you how we try to tackle this, what we see on the left here, this is Hibiscus, basically. What we do is we generate two different things. We generate the Pattern Lab, the style guide, and we generate Magnolia stuff. So in here, what we have is usually Mustache. Mustache is another templating engine, so this sounds maybe a bit complex with FreeMark and Mustache. We get back to that later. We can have here SAS or less files or whatever, so something a bit better than CSS. We can even have TypeScript or whatever. And what we then do is we use this Mustache language to kind of fork between what stuff has to go into Magnolia and what stuff has to go into Pattern Lab. So for Pattern Lab, we just create the HTML and CSS and JS, and for Magnolia, we create free marker templates. Sounds quite easy, right? So how does that work? Let's get back to the front-end hipster and the Java nerd, right? So the front-end hipster, what he would do, in this example, he starts first, but basically it can also go the other way around. He writes HTML and CSS. How does that look? Basically, here this is an example of an atom, of this choice atom. So there was this square you've seen before. And basically, it's just a div with a class, and we need some text in there. For the front-end guy, this text comes from a JSON file. Again, that's kind of part of the whole Pattern Lab thing. And it's included with this Mustache syntax. Now, to make sure that this part only ends up in the style guide, we just kind of put this not Magnolia around this. And after that, he hands the stuff over to the Magnolia guy, to the Java nerd, and he needs to add the free marker stuff. And again, in this case, it's just kind of grabbing the data of that component from Magnolia. It can be from an app, from a dialogue, whatever. And also here, to make sure that it kind of lands, this part lands in the Magnolia and not in the styleguide, we use this kind of syntax here. So basically, that's the trick. And now let's see if I succeed in delivering a demo of how this works. What I have here is I've checked out the whole thing. Actually, first I want to quickly show you that all that we show right now is on GitHub. So you can try that out. It should really kind of work out of the box, this whole setup. And after kind of doing npm install and maven whatever, you basically just say, or you, let's say the front-end guy, he basically just says npm start. And hopefully something is now going on. It sometimes takes a while, it does depend on connection and whatever. This is now already a bit, I don't know. The last test was really good. Here we go. So you see there's a gulp task, and it's doing a lot of things. You see transpiling and CSS linting and whatever. And what comes up here is again pattern lab. You see now these examples that you've seen also in Adrian's part. We have here, for example, an atom, the choice atom. Again, we can quickly show the code of this. And that's basically the output for the style guide. The mustache file behind this is more or less what we've just seen before. Maybe I can go in here a bit. So you see it's really this link text for the style guide part and the element.name here for Magnolia. Again, we can see, okay, where is this thing used? It's used in the subcomponent choices. So we basically now jump to this one here. We can also go one further and see, okay, in the info, we use this together with something else. So that's how it ends up here. Now, as there have not been that many front-end guys here in the room, maybe this, oh, sorry, you see that there's just some plain Tomcat running there. One of the cool things about this whole front-end setup is these watch tasks. And I'm just saving that, trying to quickly go back, and hopefully I'm right in time. You see this automatic reload, and the stuff is now there in pink. This obviously doesn't just work for CSS, it also works for HTML, and whatever basically you do. So this is power that the front-end dev has. Now, if you look at this a bit in more detail, what we can see here in this Hibiscus thing, we have a source folder. That's kind of the left part of my slide. Then we have two output things. We have the Magnolia resources. That's the stuff that Magnolia consumes. And we have a style guide. That's basically what we've just seen running before. Now, if we first dive into the source files, as you can see here, there's some CSS, JavaScript, whatever. And this atom choice, you see it's a mustache file, and it's exactly the same thing I've just shown before. Then we can see how that is now used in a component. No, sorry, let's go first to a subcomponent. Again, here, maybe I go too slow. We have time to discuss stuff again, maybe in the Q&A part. What we do here in the not Magnolia part, we basically iterate over an atom choice. So we iterate over this item here. And again, so like this, we really make sure that we don't repeat anything. For the Magnolia part, for the sake of this presentation or for this example, we put the data right in here. But the data that we use can also come from a dialogue or from an app. And again, we basically do the same thing. With free marker, we iterate over that subcomponent. Right. So again, how that, what is the output of this is in here. And one example is the subcomponent choices that we've just looked at. It's the HTML here. So that's what ends in the style guide. We have this four times this choice element in here, including the correct styles and so on. Now that was the view of the front-end guy. For the back-end guy, or for the, let's say, Magnolia guy, we also prepared something very similar. So instead of npm start, he would say npm run Magnolia. And again, he can work in this kind of, let's say, node environment. What this does here is creating a distribution for Magnolia. It basically fills that Magnolia resources folder. And it also creates a proxy to my local Magnolia instance. One thing that we didn't mention, you might have seen this browser sync popping up here. That's even cooler than just a watch task. I can also connect now, or not even connect, I can have a phone, a mobile phone or tablet, listening to the same, to my IP here. And whenever I change something in the code, not just the browser will update, but also the phone will update. That's another nice tool, actually, that is part of Pattern Lab. But what I want to show here is now that in Magnolia, we have created a sample that also comes with what you check out from GitHub. And again, you see this connect browser sync. So you see, oh, it's pink. Well, it's the same source as before, right? So what I want to do again is to maybe make it a bit less pink. And I just save it. And what should happen now here is that even for the Magnolia dev, the stuff can work really quickly. This also applies to changes you do in the free marker and whatever. Now, how does it look, again, in more detail for this guy? The source obviously has to be exactly the same, and the output is slightly different, so it goes in this Magnolia resources folder here. And in the templates part, we have the FTL file. So I think I want to show this one. So that's basically what, that's the template or the component that Magnolia is then using. And maybe I can quickly show you that again. This part here, I cannot edit it because we have the data directly. There's no dialog connected to it. But for example, this one here, you see that this is connected to some dialog. And the data, again, changes. And now how is that working? And here comes this Magnolia Light tool into play that Toffo mentioned this morning. I also quickly want to show you that. So I go back to the source part, because we really bundle also the YAML files into the source, even though that's not really used in styleguide, but then we can process that stuff using the node tools. So for the choices, it's actually quite boring, but for the subcomponent teaser, that's the one I just showed with the 3 fields, you see that the YAML file actually looks much more, much nicer. Then you don't need the actions because of the default actions. You don't need to have the long class names. But what we get out of this, if we run the distribution, that's the wrong one, we should get, not this one here, but it's a dialog, so I want to say this one. So basically, again, this is committed this is created automatically, not by Hibiscus itself, but by Magnolia Light, which we bundle. So that's, I think, enough for the demo. Let's continue. So what we think is kind of cool about this, first of all, the front-end and the back-end development can run in parallel. So that's also something that was mentioned before, that this kind of helps, because it doesn't really matter who starts with doing the first step. We just need a component, but if the CSS is already there, or if that gets added later by the front-end guy, it doesn't really matter. Every developer can focus on his domain. So front-end guy, he knows about SAS and whatever. That's cool for him. The other guy knows about FreeMarker. We have all this cool tooling with watch task, with browser sync, and so on. We have reusable components. So we have this whole atomic design approach. We even have a live reload in Magnolia, like this. What we still think is to improve, it's basically quite complex. So the guys that want to get started here, they have to deal with FreeMarker, they have to deal with Moustache. It's not completely easy. It also has some advantages, because you see everything that is Moustache is basically the front-end part, and FreeMarker is basically the Magnolia part. Then also this kind of forking between what is styleguide, what is Magnolia, we don't like it so much yet. Maybe there's also time in an unconference part later on to see if somebody has some better ideas here. And what is actually really dangerous is if somebody's doing stuff like this. So we wanted to make one source, right? And always make sure that the styleguide and the Magnolia is in sync. But if somebody puts HTML or Java or CSS classes in between those parts that are only for Magnolia and only for styleguide, then we have disaster. So then quickly the stuff gets out of sync. So one rule that we don't really enforce, but you shall not copy HTML. The way to go is this: always make sure that the the syntax, the HTML part, is kind of outside of these forks between Magnolia and the styleguide. We are already coming to wrapping it up. So basically what we've shown is this whole atomic design approach by Brad Frost that we really like and that really makes sure that you don't repeat yourself. We've shown you style guides and kind of the next step of living style guides to make sure that the application and the style guide are always in sync. And we've shown you one tool that can do that, which we call the Hibiscus. Now, if you want to find out more, you can try it out. It's on GitHub, Netcetera group/Hibiscus. You can also send us an email if you have any questions. As Adrian said, we're already using it on a couple of projects. It seems to work. It definitely needs a bit of ramp up, but we are quite happy so far. And I think we are ready to take questions.